Oh, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Word Traction podcast. Hope everybody survived the 4th of July with all their digits intact, particularly the more sensitive parts. And I was just doing a quick check-in on Bully Pulpit. The title of this very short episode is independence for thee and not for independence for me and not for thee, which sounds just like Donald Trump because it's all about him, and it is. It is Bully Pulpit calls back to Teddy Roosevelt. You will remember that one of Trump's recent trips on his brand new fancy airplane was out to the dedication ceremony for the in the Dakotas for the Teddy Roosevelt Museum, and Trump tried to, as he tries to do with other historical figures that he holds in some sort of esteem, he tries to steal their glory. And he said, Teddy, just like me, a strong leader who was concerned about the environment and progressive values. You see the resemblance? No, obviously not. And Roosevelt, the Roosevelt family was, it's an interesting parallel because that's the sort of family, the New York old money crowd, the Roosevelts and the like, that looked down their noses, their collective noses, at Donald Trump throughout his entire life, and was the birth of one of the greatest grievances that he has held with him for more than 60 years now. That, hey, I'm a big real estate developer guy. He he knew how to get a mortgage, knew how to default on it, knew how to avail himself of the Chapter 11 protections before and after his illustrious casino career. Right? But the Roosevelts were the folks that kind of said, "Oh, these nouveau riche dicks like Trump, he's not one of us. He may be building towers in Manhattan, but he's not one of us. He's an outer borough. This is Donnie from Queens. So, avoid. He's just, he's a pretender. And they were right about that. He was a low rent, high sizzle variety of that particular self promoter that has sort of signified the way that he has conducted himself throughout his entire life. But two stories that are related: the Bully Pulpit framing back when Teddy Roosevelt would use that term, right? Bully had a very different meaning, and it was sort of came across the pond on the same route that the slave trade and the Mayflower and other boats brought across to us. And bully used to be like either congratulations, bully for you, or that's fucking awesome. Like bully, bully. That's like the hot shit. That's great. High five. Right? And we think of Trump, of course, if you think of Trump as the epitome of a bully, fascist or otherwise, who stands at his pulpit, false prophet, combined with tendencies to bully, as all cowards do, then that bully pulpit means something completely different than when Teddy used that himself. And Teddy, interesting guy. If you haven't read a biography on the fine man, it's worthwhile. A very interesting life. Some not as profound medical challenges as his cousin FDR, but challenges that he faced himself, his ride through Mexico in the Southwest, his dedication to the environment, his love of the environment, to being the Natural History Museum, all of those things that made Teddy a great American. Trump is none of those things. So bully, I'm talking about a bully in the Trump sense. Two stories tying in little Marco Rubio and how Trump is weaponizing Rubio State Department to put pressure on the UN for its fascist purposes. Right? What Trump has most frequently used against allies, these are not our enemies, our allies, is the threat of tariffs. Essentially, I'm threatening you with financial ruin unless you make me feel good about myself because I'm King DJT, right? Little Lloyd Fauntleroy, the Massengill Mussolini, all of the things that Trump is. Right? So what he's instructed Rubio to do in the last couple weeks related to Iran and Cuba. Iran, Trump asked Rubio to put pressure on world leaders not to show up at the funeral of Iran's former supreme leader, Khomeini, right? Now, you can say reasonably that we are at war with these people. Why should a U.S. representative show up at a funeral for a supreme leader from a country that once chanted death to America? Right? I could make some blatantly false equivalences about bad American behavior, but I'll skip that because this is Sunday and we're thinking positively about our great country after Donald Trump's masterful. I was up well past my bedtime and unfortunately got a live feed of Trump's speech before and during fireworks, which was, the entire state fair and 4th of July was miserably, poorly planned, miserably executed. And then you layer in 100+ degree temperatures, malfunctioning devices, marching parolees in jackboots and masks, the Nazis marching in Washington, that's at the invitation of the president because you don't do that without permission, right? Tacit or otherwise. You can't do that kind of shit in Washington, D.C. without at least the agreement that the president isn't going to chase you down and kill you. So, therefore, that is in support of the fascist mafia, the Trump regime. There were jackbooted. If you missed it's in my feed. It is disturbing and a reminder because of the timeline that they had masks on, so I cannot possibly positively identify any of these young men with any degree of certainty. I know that Palantir can, but I can't do it with I was going to say with my naked eye, which is naked or clothed. The vision quality is not all that great. I don't know who they were, but you have to imagine that with the thousands of people that were there and the thousands of people that were pardoned by Trump because of their terrorism during J6, that there's some sort of overlap. So that was a reminder that there are consequences beyond stealing the American taxpayers' money to pay pardons to people that don't deserve it. There are downstream consequences of these emboldened Nazis hurting American citizens because they have a sense of impunity now that he arrested me, he paroled me, he pardoned me, and he paid me to do it. So this is a money making venture. Terrorism in the United States, if you're white, is a money making venture. So I'm going to get in on it because there's only 2 years left of Trump. And I'm going to wear the mask. I'm going to do the march. I'm going to wear the swastika. I'm going to do the jackboots. I'm going to carry a gun and do all the things my dear leader requests of me because I'm going to get paid and I'm going to get pardoned. No downside, except for being a miserable fucking American, right? So back to Marco Rubio, the stoolie, right? So he has to call up other world leaders, and he said, you can send a representative to this funeral program for the now deceased for 3 months, whatever it is, former supreme leader Khomeini, the father of the man that is now in charge of the country. And it was not just they were showing the caskets that not just Khomeini, but his wife, two cousins, three children, and others that were killed on that. I think most, if not all, on the first couple days of the U.S.-Israeli invasion. Right? So everybody's like, I think it's probably all forgotten because Hezbollah, which is an organization that has been pretty dedicated to at least combating Israel's ambitions to expand settlements. That's the most gracious interpretation of what Hezbollah has been about. They've been about much darker things. They are legitimate. They're a legitimate. They're a they are a social order. They are a political order. They do those things, but they're also a paramilitary and terrorist organization, not making any excuses for Hezbollah ever. Why we haven't had more of them visiting during the Olympics, that's for you to decide. So you get the arm put on you. You're just some random. You're the head of Kazakhstan. Hey, yeah, this is little Marco, and I know that Don Jr. and Eric. No, Eric's the dumb one. Remember with the blonde, Eric. You guys are in that business deal with them, right? They're going to exploit your citizens' rare, excuse me, not rare earth minerals, but critical minerals, including tungsten, and they're going to exploit it for their financial benefit. You're retaining 30% of it, but we're going to get the lion's share. So sorry to your citizens. But what I want you to do is I want you to say no to the invitation. And if you want to send somebody to represent Kazakhstan, which is, in the same region as Iran and all Muslim country. But if you're going to send somebody, you can send a busboy and a chambermaid. But if you send a a prime minister level executive committee member, you're fucked. Okay, little Marco out, and he did that a number of times too, because in Donald Trump's addled brain, he wins when he can disrespect other leaders. Now, there's nothing that I know about the family and the current supreme leader who is in hiding, understandably, how he's going to react to that additional slight once his mother, father, siblings, and cousins were murdered, killed on the first few days of that military operation. I don't know how he's going to, I'm going to guess, IRGC and otherwise, not going to behave well. So why you would add the additional indignity just to stroke yourself a little bit, why? A lot of things Trump does, you can just say, why? But this has very little upside. And more potential downside for the US and allies, and more particularly for US troops in the region, because if they get a grievance, I mean, I don't know why he'd be angry after killing his parents, that they decide when things cool down, they have a longer, their planning horizon is a lot longer than Donald Trump's, which is meal periods, right? That they decide that a year from today plus 7 days is our day. And every US base that remains in UAE, Oman, Brunei, KSA, or otherwise, Jordan, Kuwait, we're gonna just shell them just just because we can, right? And they've shown that they're not scared. They had a plan for this too. We didn't. All the talking heads like, well, anybody that has been involved in Middle East national security planning knew that they were going to attack the ships in the strait. Everybody knew that. That's great. That's a great line to put in the first chapter of your book, right? But what are the second and third order implications of killing a regime's entire top layer, going halfway through the second layer as well, and then picking up some randos, girls' school, you know, Trump sitting around with Vance saying, we're out of the woods now. If they were mad, they would have counterattacked already. So, we're good, right? JD, right? When you were in the Situation Room trying to get people to stop saying the word Epstein, did you at all, while you were in there in the place where you discussed national security matters, instead of like a soap opera that you were conducting, did you ever discuss with any of the generals and the war planners? I know that we fired all the Iranian Persian experts. So, but did you have any feels yourself on how that might go, how they might react to eliminating their entire family and then threatening to eliminate their entire race? I mean, it's been a couple months, so they're obviously they're moving on, right? They're on Twitter too. They're on TikTok. They don't have attention spans, just like our children in this country. So they're not going to remember that we did something like 4 or 5 months ago that killed their parents, right? They're not going to. They're not. I mean, they're not going to hold a grudge, right, JD? Yeah. So that's part one. Trump to Marco part two, using undue influence against our allies, is Cuba. There is a vote coming up at the UN. The issue on the table is the sanctions against the Cuban people. We're not saying that as a matter of principle and policy, the U.S. decision to try to force out the remnants of the Castro regime, we're not making a judgment on that as the UN. What we're dealing with is the decision of the U.S. to have a policy that starves the Cuban population to death might run afoul of our UN charter. Why are we here? We're the United Nations. Sure, we'll rubber stamp endless wars and stupid, they participated in rubber stamping, or at least giving the sort of nod, "What's up?" to Bush the younger in Iraq. But at least Bush went to allies, went to the UN, etc. So it was a different vibe. But here, not supporting the Castro regime, but even if we're talking about people named Castro directly related to the family, a policy that starves them to death, including millions of their citizens at the same time, some with very strong ties to the Cuban community in Miami. That policy is contrary to the UN Charter, right? It should be noted that starving people to death is a war crime. So the UN is not, even Donald Trump jumping up and down and claiming another grievance. The UN is not going to say, okay, Mr. Trump, we appreciate you getting some European players you know, uh, to NATO, which is not the UN, but we know that you've done a great thing as far as getting the other nations to participate. Whatever. Thanks, DJT. You're great. You're a fucking genius. But on this one issue, we're against starvation as a weapon of war. So, well, I haven't declared war against them. To wit, any reasonable human being over the age of 16 would say, fuck yourself if constructively, by virtue of the blockade that you control in its entirety. Yeah, well, the Cuban people, they were starving for years, for decades, for, in Trump's term, for trillions of years before I even got here and started. What we're going to do, of course, is develop resorts on the island of Cuba to benefit the Trump family for generations. That's our ultimate goal. But you can't hold us accountable because there were communists there. There were communists there. They're red. They're communists. Like, no. What I did when I took 10% of Intel for the United States, that wasn't communism, right? That was robbery. So it's not communism. Not the same thing, right? But you could, like, try to read a book, see if there's some inconsistencies in the Trump policy, and the most glaring one is putting the arm on publicly traded companies to give you an equity position for the benefit of the government or the country, which he's doing. I mean, in addition to extorting money for his own benefit and his family, he's doing it for the country, nationalistically, excuse me. That, in fact, my dear friends, is a communist device, right? Trump's not wearing a red hat. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah. So the silliness coming out of the White House doesn't stop. So what Marco is also doing, because he's the viceroy of Cuba, right? He's the godsend, the overachiever from his family is OBV, as the kids never said. He is his mother and father were Cuban, um, not refugees. They arrived in the U.S., made a life for themselves, worked extraordinarily hard. As I understand it, his dad was a bartender and his mother did other things, and they worked hard. They were proud of their son. They got him educated well, if not in elite universities. They sent him to Law at least, and which is elite. Law School is elite amongst all the schools in Coral Gables, Florida. So no shade. Um, yeah. So he's going to call around and say, listen, when that UN vote comes up for sanction, whatever the Security Council, because China and Russia are going to pile on and say, oh yeah, he's a bad guy doing bad things. He's starving humans. What kind of human does that? Putin says. But he won't what Rubio wants, what Trump wants, meaning what Rubio will translate to these other leaders around the world that sit on the Security Council. If you stand up and say, you're right, starving Cuban people to death is contrary to the UN Charter, and we shouldn't do that anymore. And Trump will impose tariffs on all those that had the temerity to be actual human beings and behave in a way as if they were like Catholic, right? As if they were Christians. And they stood up, and I'm not throwing shade at Jews or Muslims here, but Cuba, Venezuela, South America more generally, Central America, and a whole bunch of Catholics here in the United States, including the second in command in the White House, who just published a book to say that he's a better Catholic than Pope Leo. If you haven't bought the book yet, good. Don't fucking do it. Donate it to charity. Donate it. If you're gonna buy a book for 20 whatever it would be on the open market, send that to I was going to say USAID, but they're dead because Trump killed them. Send it to just write the check out to Mayor Mamdani and send it to him, and he'll find a good place. He's not going to steal it. He'll pass it along to a kitchen in New York that takes care of underprivileged children, and you can feel good about yourself. Joking, but only a little bit. Better yet, because you have to play the long game. Get the money to a reliable Venezuelan charity, not anything affiliated with the Venezuelan government, not anything affiliated with the Trump administration. But as I talked about in prior episodes, my first donation, there's been one subsequently, to the Venezuelan earthquake recovery funds more generally. Mine was to Doctors Without Borders, right? The MSF.org, MedSansFrontières.org. Wonderful organization, highly rated for low costs charged against donations and low rates of fraud, right? Direct relief. ICRC.org, International Committee of the Red Cross, right? All verifiably great organizations that are legitimately concerned about the well-being of the poor people that are always suffering. The richest people in Venezuela, that in the northern reaches of Caracas, that lived in relative luxury. They have options. They have family. They have the ability to go elsewhere, right? The ones that lived in more modest apartment buildings in La Guaira near the airport have much fewer options. They're living in tents. And, in the Northeast here, we just had 4 days of 100-degree temperature with high humidity, very uncomfortable. Summer in certain parts of Venezuela, unless you are incredibly fortunate, like this guy, to be living in a mountainous region, still got to 90, but it was 90 with 0.2% humidity. It's a different, as they say in the desert, it's a dry heat, as they say it when you're golfing in Rancho Mirage in Cali. It's a dry heat. It's 115, but you don't feel it. I was drinking more then, so I didn't feel much of anything at all. Yeah. So these brave souls will either vote their conscience and support the Cuban people that are literally dying of starvation, right? They don't have food. They don't have the infrastructure to deliver food. If they did, then the delivery vehicles don't have any access to gas to power the vehicles. and you can't run a refrigerator, and on and on and on. It's one thing connected to the other. So yeah, so that is those are two little Marcos under the thumb of one very heavy DJT, exerting the power of the presidency, United States, with zero dignity to disadvantage people that are suffering. Again, the Iranian regime has resources. They are a corrupt regime, as is the United States. The rich people that surrounded, the ones that survived the US attacks, that surrounded the family of uh, Khomeini, the son, who reportedly injured but still alive and issuing orders and still leading. We don't know that. No, he's not giving any. Leslie Stahl is not interviewing him, but the word will get out. But they have a vast network, as they do in Venezuela, of military corruption that will run a government in the absence of senior leadership, in the absence of tricky Nick Maduro, and in the absence of the nearly, if not dearly departed supreme leader. There is a machine in place that will run things, you know. And when if Trump says, he wants to walk away from Iran because he sees the elections on the just over the transom, and he thinks that being involved in a war or additional disruptions of petroleum more generally, meaning gas, oil, but also fertilizer. Those are lagging effects that are going to be felt through the economy for 2 years. Trump is going to jawbone every way that he possibly can to keep the price of gasoline in the United States artificially low through the election. Obvious reasons, right? What but the real tragedy is, of course, it remains the poor people in Venezuela after the natural disaster. But the unnatural disaster, which is Cuba, yeah, there is need for reform in the government, in the style of government. You can argue you're not a fan of their brand of communism, socialism, or democratic socialism, whatever you want to argue. That's true. But if you think that a strategy that involves starving people to death to prove a point is the way to be a good human, then you missed a few lessons in Bible study, or you blew it off altogether. So, thank you, and we'll leave it there for this holiday Sunday, and another firework. My my much better half had to evacuate the young four-legged assassin, not young, the four-legged assassin from our humble abode yesterday to avoid him encountering too many fireworks too close to where we live, because there were numerous uh, displays of people that were poorly parented. And the explosions that just go on and bring a great deal of discomfort to our four-legged assassin. So he was evacuated to his grandmother's house to hide or live in comfort with his grandmother and stay cool and stay somewhat insulated from the worst of the fireworks. So, that's because that's what kind of mother that particular woman is, and grateful for that. So thank you. And if I may, if I might, my wish that I would wish that I could have tonight would be, of course, share, retweet, like, subscribe, subscribe on other platforms. And if you have an extra $4.25, then I would beseech you to get the money online, no fee associated with that process, to the I was gonna say the IRGC. That's a different kind of charity, right? No, to the International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC, to MSF.org, right? Doctors Without Borders, alias Med Sans Frontières, or Direct Relief. So, again, if you got $3.25, $3.17 left over from buying 1 gallon of gas for the lawnmower or whatever you're doing, and you can say, you know what? Instead of getting that caramel triple skinny freaky deaky latte from some overpriced coffee bar, I'm gonna do something that's gonna make me feel good and help another human being. So you could donate that and indicate that it's for the Venezuelan uh, relief fund. You could indicate on other sites, I mean, Sudan, ongoing daily need, and or other Cuba. If you are a descendant, as many of my compatriots and neighbors were when I lived in South Florida. So yes, so thank you. I'm gonna because of the sun. I came out here and it was cool, and I'm sitting in the sun and cooking a little bit. So I'm gonna do one of those turn the camera, lift it up, and step towards the building a little bit because then I'll be able to shut it off without deleting the entire recording. So thank you. Wishing you all a delightful day. We'll be back with you tomorrow. I'm still working again on this larger open source piece that but there's just so many the the philosophical implications of open source. In as you know, there's open source. Um, uh, yeah, there are connections through national security intelligence gathering there, but my particular concern is for tech and the lessons we learned going through the 70s and 80s in Silicon Valley and the way that China learned very different lessons open source and is the concept of an open source system emblematic, totemic, or otherwise reflective of our different societies in China and the United States, even as our government under Donald J. Trump is behaving more like a communist, corrupt organization than as a democracy. So, yeah, you'll that'll be tomorrow. Yeah, they're not getting no more Supreme Court cases. So thank you. I'm gonna do a little sliding of camera and lifting of camera without dropping of camera. Little look at the sunny and beautiful outside. Thank you, and bear with me. Thank you very much.